I've put over 200 hours into the Forever Winter. I've lived through the construction foam grind, the mech farming economy, and every major patch this game has had. And right now, something about this game feels unsettled. The Forever Winter was pitched as grimdark survival horror. Employee owned, no outside shareholders, pure creative direction, oppressive mechs, industrial decay, scarcity emerging from the world itself. That was the identity. Now, it's 2026. There's documented VC involvement beginning mid-2024, a formal early-stage investment in early 2025, a surge in character-driven cosmetic drops, an economy overhaul that reshaped progression systems players had spent hundreds of hours grinding, stacked travel layers, artificial scarcity through cooldowns and timers, volatile player retention, community fracture, and major content creators quietly stepping away. So, what happened? And I'm asking this as somebody who's put over 200 hours into this game, like a lot of you probably have. Around October 2025, we got this quote: "Our only shareholders are the men and women working on the game." That's a clear statement, but publicly visible investor involvement begins August 2024. By February 2025, there's documentation of an early stage VC deal. The studio appears in Galaxy Interactive's portfolio. That timeline doesn't cleanly align with the only internal shareholders narrative. That's not speculation, that's chronological tension. Now, investors existing doesn't automatically mean creative corruption, but when outside capital enters a project, expectations enter with it. Growth expectations, revenue expectations, return expectations. Even if they're subtle, even if they are never said out loud, that changes incentive structure. Originally, the Forever Winter marketed oppressive environments, industrial horror, mechs as environmental gods. The world was the star. Then, we see Kevlar Cake, then Octo Girl. These are character-forward, body-centric, highly marketable designs. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't about morality. It's about tonal shift. The visual center of gravity moved from world oppression to character presentation. At the same time, cosmetic drops became clear engagement beats. When updates hit, player count spikes. When cosmetics drop, engagement spikes. Then it tapers. That's a live service cadence pattern, and that pattern intensifies after investor involvement enters the timeline. Not proof of causation, but absolutely directional correlation. The Steam charts doesn't necessarily show collapse. It shows instability. All-time peak near 9600, now hovering in the hundreds most days. Spikes around updates, drop-offs afterward. If you've been here since day one, you felt that rhythm. Big patch, buzz, engagement, then quiet. That volatility changes how a studio reacts, and that's where things start shifting more aggressively. Construction foam used to define progression. You needed 175. It spawned maybe 2 or 3 per hour. It was infamous. If you were here during that era, you know exactly what I'm talking about. People were losing their minds over foam routes, grinding for hours, optimizing spawns, farming mechs, the same mechs that were originally pitched as unkillable threats, because they became the only real way to make serious money. A lot of us poured dozens of hours into that system, upgrading the bar, maxing quarters, dumping tens of millions of credits. And then, foam becomes obsolete. Legacy barely drops. That's not tuning, that's rewriting history. And if you were part of that grind, it doesn't feel neutral. It feels destabilizing. Ammo jumps to 20 to 50,000 credits for 50 rounds. Guns, 70,000 plus. Grenade launchers, near 300,000. Repairs stretching into real-time days. Crafting timers extended. Vendors throttled. The explanation is battlefield shortages, which Sounds immersive. But when vendors are supposedly tied to major factions and supply lines, and every vendor sells every ammo type at a uniform inflated pricing, it doesn't feel like environmental scarcity anymore. It feels mechanical. Scarcity from the world feels oppressive. Scarcity from cooldown timers feels restrictive. And when you stack that on top of everything else, it stops feeling intentional. It starts feeling reactive. Now, to be fair, the most recent patch adjusts some of this. Ammo availability increased, repair times reduced, crafting shortened, costs slightly lowered. That's good. That shows responsiveness. But it also reinforces something important. The system swings hard, then partially correct. That's not a steady direction. That's reactive adjustment. And reactive balancing isn't inherently bad, but when it becomes a pattern, it signals uncertainty. Fast travel didn't always work the way it does now. Earlier versions of early access, before the tunnels existed, getting to later regions was actually pretty simple. You deployed using water. The farther out the region was, the more water it cost. That was the system. Then, the tunnels update arrived. Now regions were physically connected through a tunnel network. You had to explore those tunnels, discover the region, and once it was unlocked, you could fast travel there using water and fast travel drones, which themselves required a fairly large credit investment and or materials farmed from the tunnels. That already changed the loop. Explore the tunnels, unlock the region, invest in the drone system, spend water to travel. But the system didn't stop evolving there. Now we have the garage layer, the Bunko APC travel system, which only unlocks after a chain quest, so now you can alternate travel costs through the APC, which we then saw a blanket increase in water costs to fast travel. There was now reduced water availability in the world, free spawn points got removed, and individually, none of these systems are inherently bad, but they stack. And stacking systems isn't the same thing as refining a core gameplay loop. And then there's the feel of the game itself. The game isn't hard, it's hard to play. And there's a difference. Real difficulty comes from oppressive tension, calculated risk, from losing because you made a mistake. But being hard to play means AI behaving inconsistently, squads roaming without readable logic, mechs hovering unnaturally close to players, pot shots landing without clear aggro triggers, stun lock animations chaining into death spirals. One stun becomes 3, and 3 becomes guaranteed death. That's friction, and friction layered on top of artificial scarcity and stacked systems doesn't feel brutal, it feels unstable. The community in Discord is fragmented. Debates over art direction were nearly constant, especially after the Kevlar cake skin dropped around December. Some players lean into the cosmetic culture, others feel like the original grimdark tone has been diluted. Even the way the community engages with the game has shifted. You see more character-focused fan art, more emphasis on specific designs, and more attention on individual characters, which is a noticeable contrast from how the game originally presented itself. And you can see that tension show up in the people who were closest to the game. Relo helped bring a lot of early attention and hype to the Forever Winter, but Kilpo 1 was different. He spent a lot of time digging into the game's systems and lore, streaming it consistently, breaking things down, talking through what worked, what didn't, and where the game could improve. He approached it from a player's perspective, not just showcasing the game, but trying to understand it. And over time, that tone shifted. He's mentioned on stream that communication with the developers slowed down, and that his feedback may have been seen as too critical. Eventually, he stopped playing altogether, around the same time many players were hitting that wall during the foam grind era. And that's not about one creator leaving, it's about what that represents. When someone that invested, someone trying to engage with the game at that level, steps away, it usually means something deeper isn't landing. The Forever Winter isn't failing because it's brutal. It's struggling because its direction feels pulled in multiple directions at once. Grimdark survival horror, character-driven cosmetic cadence, artificial scarcity economy, system layering and gating, reactive balance swings, mechanical friction layered on top. Individually, none of these are fatal. Collectively, they don't feel cohesive. They feel reactive. The game doesn't look dead, it looks uncertain. And uncertainty fractures communities faster than difficulty ever could. Because if the game doesn't clearly know what it wants to be, the player base will argue about it for you. Difficulty builds loyalty. Directional confusion erodes it.